Good morning, all. Brian S. Pratt here. Going to read chapter 24 of Shepherd's Quest, book 1 of the Broken Key Trilogy. So, the boys I've been exploring the labyrinth under what they call the command center in the ruins of Algoth, and they've had traps. They've experienced a ghost battle. The horses are gone now, so looks like they're going to have to walk out of Goblin territory. And when the guy came into Goblin territory, they had to flee fast goblins. So they're kind of worried about that. And so let's see what happens. So chapter 24 with commentary, most likely spoilers. This is really meant for, my readings are really meant for people who have already read the trilogy and just people who want added content. If you're reading it for the first time, you may enjoy it. You may get annoyed by the spoilers. Just saying. All right, chapter 24. Early the next morning, they gathered their things and returned to the command building. They agreed that if they were going to still be in the ruins of Algoth come nightfall, they would spend the night in the kitchen where the entrance to the labyrinth was located. At least that way, they should avoid most of what would take place out in the hall. Because it seems like if they're out in the ruins, they're going to get attacked and killed. If they're in the hall, they're going to get woke up, attacked, and probably killed if they don't move. But so far, every time they've been in the kitchen, nothing's bothered them there. So the ghost battle's never gone as far as the kitchen, for some reason. And so that's why. Before setting out to descend into the labyrinth, they stacked all their equipment against the wall. Then they filled their packs with only essential items in order to have plenty of space for additional treasure. "I hope we find the key today," announced Chad. He felt much better. As much of his energy had returned. A good breakfast and most of a night's rest had done wonders. "So do I," replied Riyan. As soon as Bart had the lantern lit, they made their way down the stairs and resumed the search for the key. Riyan was quite happy that he had the foresight to make arrows out of the marker coins at all the intersections to point the way back. It was now a simple matter to follow them to what they believed was the last area yet to search. "What do we do if after searching every possible passage we fail to find anything?" asked Kevin. The three friends were silent for a moment before Bart replied. "In that case, we'll wait until tonight. When the battle manifests again, as I'm convinced it will, then when the Lord makes his way down here, we'll follow him. He should lead us to something." "Good idea," said Riyan. Let's just hope it doesn't come to that." They passed through two more junctions as they continued following the path indicated by the arrows. When they reached the junction containing the final arrow, Bart took the lead. The passage continued for 20 feet before ending at another T-junction. There were no coins positioned at any of these passage openings, so they knew they were in unexplored territory. A quick glance down to the right and left revealed both ways extended past the reach of the lantern. Bart glanced to Riyan, who shrugged. "I'd say left," was Ryan's suggestion. "Left it is," Bart replied. He waited a moment for Riyan to place marker coins in the appropriate spots on the floor to mark their progress. Once Riyan finished, Bart entered the left-hand passage. They followed it down for a ways before coming to another passage branching off to their left. Again, this one had no marker coins. They decided to proceed forward, and Riyan marked the way appropriately. Then, not too far past the left-hand branching, they reached where the passage ended at another T-junction. After the marker coins were placed, they turned to follow the right-hand passage. This one continued forward a good distance before turning to the left, then a short way to another right-hand turn. They followed this passage until the lantern's light showed where it turned once again to the left. "Ah!" Before they came to the turn, Kevin screamed as the floor suddenly opened up directly beneath his feet. He must have stepped on a pressure plate and triggered a trap. Kevin plummeted down, and only his fast thinking saved him. Casting his goose spell again, he encased himself in the sticky substance then started thrashing about in an attempt to make contact with the wall of the shaft. His fall was abruptly halted when his hand touched the wall and the goo adhered to it. "Kevik!" yelled Ryan. It was hard to look up, but Kevik was able to see the other three standing at the opening in the floor. "Make your light if you can," Bart hollered down to him. His bobbing sphere appeared. "We see you," Ryan said. Ryan turned to Bart. "You'll have to lower me down on the rope," he said. "Can't," Bart replied. "I won't be able to haul you both up here on my own," indicating Chad, he added. "With his arm recently healed, he'll be no help." Ryan stared at him and was about to argue when he realized Bart was right. "What do we do?" he asked. Bart began uncoiling his rope and went to the edge of the pit. "Kevik!" he hollered. I'm going to tie a loop on the end of the rope and then lower it down to you." He paused and listened, but no reply came. "If he's covered in that goo stuff of his," Ryan said, "he won't be able to reply." Lowering the rope down to where the bobbing sphere was, he said, "Here comes the rope. When it's in the right position, cancel your light, then make it reappear." He continued to lower the rope rapidly until he saw the bobbing sphere disappear. Then a few seconds later, it reappeared. Ryan grasped the rope behind him. "Now," Bart hollered, "you'll have to grab hold of the rope so we can pull you up." Chad stood next to the edge of the pit to watch what happened. He could barely make out where Kevik was stuck to the wall. All that was readily apparent was a bobbing sphere. Then suddenly, he saw movement as Kevik dispelled his goo. Dispelled the goo covering himself. Then suddenly he saw movement as Kevik dispelled the goo covering himself and went for the rope. Bart and Ryan felt tension began to drag on the rope for a second before it again went slack. "He didn't make it," said Chad. He and the others watched in horror as Kevik's body fell until coming to a sudden stop when he hit the bottom. As soon as he hit, the bobbing sphere went out. "Kevik!" Ryan hollered. They listened for a reply, but none was forthcoming. "Is he dead?" asked Chad. "Maybe," replied Bart. My rope isn't long enough to reach him." "We can't leave him down there," insisted Ryan. "How do you propose we reach him?" Bart asked. "He's not even conscious." "There has to be a way," said Chad. Bart considered for a moment and tried to recall what his father had told him about situations such as this. "Always keep in mind," his father had said, "if a pit is deep enough, they had to have a way for those who dug it to get out. At times, it could be depressions carved into the sides of the pit to enable them to climb out, or a passage of some sort leading away at the bottom." "But wouldn't that allow a chance to escape the trap?" Bart had asked. "If the pit is deep enough," his father explained, "the builder wouldn't worry about that, as the fall would either kill the thief or damage him to such an extent that he couldn't get away." "There may be a way to reach him," Bart said as he came back to the here and now. "Check the sides of the passage for anything that might be used for handholds." I would say for hands and footholds. That sounds better. A quick check revealed there were none. "It's possible there's a way out of the bottom," Bart told him. "We just have to find the other end." "So we are to just leave him?" Chad asked. "That doesn't seem right." "What else is there for us to do?" replied Bart. "We can't go get him from here. And by the time we manage to get back to the marketplace and procure a rope of sufficient length, providing of course there are any to be had, we'd still have to make our way back through Goblin territory on foot. Even if we survive, Kevin would probably be dead by the time we return. His only chance is for us to continue and hopefully find a way to him." "If he's alive, he does have another healing potion," offered Ryan. Bart nodded. "So, I suggest we stop standing here talking and press onward." Ryan felt bad about leaving Kevik in the pit, but in the face of Bart's logic, there seemed no other alternative. Leaning over the edge, he stared down into the darkness and hollered, "Kevik, if you can hear me, we are not going to leave you there to die. We'll find a way to you, I promise." The pit remained dark. Had he been conscious, Ryan was sure his bobbing sphere would have been present. "Here," Bart said to the others as he held out his rope to them. I suggest we tie ourselves together in the event we trigger another such pitfall. Bart, of course, took the lead with Chad in the middle. Riyan anchored them at the rear. He knew that if what happened to Kevik happened to Bart, it would be up to him to prevent them all from falling. Before we set out again, Bart turned to them and said, "Single file from here on out. There could be other traps such as what Kevik ran afoul of." When Riyan and Chad nodded understanding, he turned and moved away from the pit. Riyan cast a last glance at the opening in the floor before the rope pulled him forward. Bart stayed on the left side of the passage as he quickly led them forward. I want to get onward because the last sentence ended with forward, and I don't want to end this sentence with forward. All the time, the possibility that he could meet the same fate as Kevik was foremost in his mind. He turned the corner to the left, proceeded forward another short distance, then followed the passage as it turned left once more. From there, it ran forward down a longer stretch until it ended at a room. When the lantern's light illuminated the room, a monstrous apparition appeared before them. The shock of seeing it startled Bart so badly that he actually backpedaled into Chad. Chad stopped him with a hand against his back and asked, "What's wrong?" He hadn't seen what had scared Bart so badly. Bart didn't reply, only stared at the darkness within the room. When his nerves settled down and nothing materialized from out of the darkness, he started forward again. The monstrous apparition turned out to be a statue, one of two that sat prominently in the room. Both were nearly identical. The statues were of life-size demonic creatures. The fact that they stood upon 2 foot-high pedestals gave them the appearance of looming over Bart and the others. Their faces were bestial with small horns sprouting from their foreheads. A long, scaly tail extended outward behind them. "Look familiar?" asked Riyan as he turned his gaze to the other two. "Yeah," replied Chad. "From the crypt." "Exactly," said Riyan. "Remember the mural we found there? The knights were fighting creatures like these." "Then perhaps they weren't just an artist's rendition to magnify the glory of the dead," supposed Bart. "They may have actually existed at one time." "Do you think that they still do?" asked Riyan. Bart shook his head. "No. If they did, I'm sure we would have heard about it by now." He gave the 2 statues a cursory examination, especially the base. It looked as if the bases were solid and didn't hold a hidden compartment. There were no seams. Hang on one second. Another exit led from the room 10 feet farther down along the same wall they had entered, through which they had entered. "Shall we go?" asked Bart. Riyan and Chad were transfixed by the creatures. A shudder went through Riyan as he gazed into the eyes of one. They seemed so real. Then the spell was broken as Bart laid a hand on his shoulder. He turned just as Bart said, "We shouldn't dawdle here. Kevik could need our help." Riyan nodded. "Right." Then he and Chad followed Bart from the room. Once into the passage leaving from the room, they followed it in single file, just as before. It went straight for a bit, then turned left and continued for the same distance before turning left again. They followed the passage until it turned back to the right. The passage then continued forward 10 feet before opening up onto a large circular room. Emanating from the room ahead was a very subtle yet noxious odor. The light from the lantern revealed the floor was smooth as glass. Its light didn't illuminate far enough to show the other side of the room. Bart came dim far enough to show the room in its entirety. I like that better. Bart came to a halt at the opening. The sight of the floor sent warning signals running through him. When Riyan came to stand beside him and saw the floor, he too was leery. "What is it?" he asked. "I'm not sure," replied Bart. "You have any more of those copper coins?" "A couple," Riyan told him. "Hand me one, will you?" "Sure," Riyan said, and removed one from his pouch. "Here." He handed one of his few remaining coppers to Bart. There weren't that many left. Most still sat on the floor of converging passages as arrows. Bart took the coin and tossed it into the room. Plunk! When the coin hit the floor, the surface splashed. It was a liquid of some kind. Give me another, Bart said. When he had the coin in hand, he knelt down by the edge of the room's floor and very carefully dipped the coin into the liquid. As soon as the coin hit the surface, or contacted the surface, as soon made contact with the surface. As soon as the coin made contact with the surface, he noticed a very faint, acrid odor coming from the point of contact. He dipped the coin halfway into the liquid and then pulled it back out. The surface of the coin that had been within the liquid was now pitted and scarred. Acid, he said. Acid? Asked Chad incredulously. Why would they fill the bottom of a room with acid? That would seem pretty obvious, replied Bart. To keep us from continuing, guessed Ryan. Exactly. Standing up, he pitched the ruined coin into the room, and they watched it as it disappeared beneath the surface. At least we know we're finally on the right track. Turning back to the other two, he pointed to the pool of acid and added, they wouldn't have gone to the trouble of creating that unless there was something of incredible value on the other side. Such as the key? Asked Ryan. Bart nodded. Exactly. And a possible way of reaching Kevik, said Ryan. First thing we have to do, though, is to get past this pool of acid, Bart explained. Any ideas? Chad asked. I think it would be a safe assumption that this would be part of the escape route the Lord took when he fled the battle, began Bart. If so, then there has to be an easy and quick way to get through here in an emergency. That would make sense, agreed Ryan. But how? Mused Bart. A secret way around it, suggested Chad. Nodding, Bart said, could be. There has to be a secret trigger somewhere that will do something to enable us to continue. He pointed to the edge of the acid pool. Let's begin here and work our way back. So they began checking the floors and walls, starting at the edge of the room, and then worked their way back down the passage. It was a slow and painstaking process, but they were left with little choice. Ryan had the idea that they could wait for the Lord to show up and find out where he pressed. I didn't like that. Where he pressed what? Find out how he managed to get through. That's better. But then Bart reminded him that Kevik was still down the shaft and might not have that much time. It would be half a day yet or longer before the ghost battle manifested. They finally worked their way back to the turn in the passage and continued to search for some sort of triggering mechanism as they went. It was when they were about halfway past the turn when Chad triggered the trap. He had been working on one side of the passage while Ryan and Bart had been doing the other. Somehow, his foot must have hit a pressure plate, for the floor opened up on him just as it had for Kevik. If it wasn't for the rope that still bound him to the others, he would have been a goner. When he fell, both Ryan and Bart were caught off guard. Ryan was pulled into the opening and barely stopped himself in time by grabbing onto the edge. Bart had hit the floor and had also come to a stop at the edge of the pit. They held their positions for a moment, none daring to breathe for fear of disrupting the delicate balance they held. Bart spoke first when his heart stopped racing so fast. Is everyone all right? He asked. I'm fine, replied Ryan. He had both arms braced above the pit while the rest of him dangled within it. Chad's weight was a heavy burden, and it was all he could do to keep himself from being dragged down with him. Chad, hollered Bart when he didn't answer. Are you okay? I think so, he replied. I would greatly appreciate it if you could get me out of here. Ryan couldn't help but give a half-hearted chuckle at that. Ryan, you hold still while I pull him out, Bart said. Not a problem. Ryan adjusted his grip to Ryan made adjustments to maximize his grip, then gave Bart a nod. Bart very gingerly maneuvered himself into a better position for pulling up Chad. Up was a U and a bracket. Yeah. Once he was braced, he hollered down to Chad. I'm going to pull now. Don't move. What? Do you think I was going to start swinging down here? Came the reply. Bart just shook his head as he began pulling on the rope. Foot by foot, he brought Chad closer to the opening. Ryan kept an eye on his progress and gave Bart updates. After a couple of minutes of pulling, Ryan said, He's almost there. Just stay where you are, grunted Bart. Don't do anything until he's up and out. Ryan nodded and then said to Chad as he came abreast of him, Have a nice fall? You could say that, Chad replied, though from the expression on his face, it had been anything but pleasant. When Bart finally had him near the opening, Chad reached up and helped by gripping the edge and pulling himself the rest of the way. Once he was out of the pit, he gave Bart a hand with Riyan. "Whew," said Riyan. "Glad we have the rope tied about us." "Should have had us do it after that very first pit trap we encountered," admitted Bart, "but I just didn't think about it." "You know, I heard what sounded like a river flowing down there," said Chad. "A river?" asked Riyan. "Sounded like it," he said. Riyan moved to the opening and looked down. "Wonder how far it is." Farther than we can get to," Bart said as he returned to his feet. "We still need to find that trigger." Chad and Riyan got to their feet and they resumed their search. From that point on, while they were searching, they stepped most cautiously. Fortunately, they encountered no additional pitfalls. It took them some time, but they finally ended up back at the room with the two demonic statues. "Somehow, I figured we'd end up back here," said Riyan. "So did I," agreed Bart. He undid himself from the rope. "You two check the walls, I'll go over the statues." "You already went over them once," Chad said. Bart shrugged. "I wasn't looking all that hard and could have missed something. This time, I will take more care and be a bit more thorough." He began at the head of the first statue and very carefully pushed, twisted, and pulled anything that could possibly be used as a trigger. It wasn't until he was checking the area of the statue where the tail left the main body that he came across something interesting. Just underneath the tail, where the creature's butt would have been had it been alive, he found a small opening. It was barely large enough for a single finger. He inserted his finger into it to the second knuckle before his fingertip encountered resistance. The resistance shifted slightly under pressure, but otherwise didn't move. Excited by the find, he removed his finger, then went to the other statue to see if a similar opening was present there as well. Sure enough, when he checked under the tail, he found an exact duplicate of the previous opening. Sticking in his finger, he tried pushing the resistance, but just like the other one, it only shifted a little bit. "Riyan," he said, "I need your help." Turning away from the section of the wall he had been checking, Riyan asked, "You find something?" "I think so," replied Bart. "Come here and give me a hand." When Riyan came to his side, he showed him where the opening was. There was another just like it on the other statue. "I think we need to activate them simultaneously." While Bart moved to the other statue, Riyan commented, "If this is the trigger, it would have thwarted a lone thief." Indeed, the statues were sitting too far apart to allow a single individual to reach both openings at the same time. But thinking back on that, then that means if the Lord's escaping this way, he had to have somebody else. He couldn't do it alone. And if everyone else fell, well, then he'd be lost too. There'd be no sense in progressing unless there was another way an even more hidden, perhaps more time-consuming ways to get through. Bart reached the other statue and placed his finger in the opening under the tail. Then, just as he was about to tell Riyan to press it, Chad started laughing. "What's so funny?" he asked. Chad shook his head as the laughter rolled forth. "You guys have no idea what it looks like you're doing." He stood there staring at them, and the laughter bubbled up again. Riyan and Bart stood next to their respective statues with their fingers up the butt, as it were, of the demonic creatures. Bart ignored him and turned his attention to Riyan. He saw Riyan had a big grin on his face too, as he came to realize what he must look like. What they must look like. "Riyan," Bart said loudly and got his attention. "When I count to 3, press it." Riyan nodded. 1, 2, 3. When Bart said 3, he and Riyan simultaneously pushed against the resistance. This time, Bart felt it slide back an inch. When nothing in the room changed, he quickly led them back through the passage to the acid room. That had definitely been the trigger they had been searching for. A line of stepping stones had risen out of the pool and now led across the center of the room. Just within the room before them, there were 2 stones sitting side by side. Then another set of 2 stones passed the first set before the line became single stones. "Not yet," Bart said as he stopped Riyan from stepping on the stones. "Why?" asked Riyan. He pointed to the 2 pairs of stones before them. "Step on the wrong one and something bad could happen," he explained. "Then which one should we step on?" Chad asked. The first pair was 1.5 feet from the opening, or from the edge of the passage. The next pair was the same distance away from the first. Bart thought about it for a second and then said, You two hold on to my arm while I lean out and put my weight on each of the stones. Riyan nodded as he and Chad both gripped his arm. Bart placed his left foot 2 inches from the edge of the acid pool. Then, leaning onward, he brought his right foot down on the left stone. He no sooner had begun to put weight on it than the stone receded back into the pool. Riyan and Chad pulled him back as soon as they saw the stone begin to sink. Then they tried again with the other stone and found it to be secure. Once Bart had his full weight upon it, they let go. One more time, Bart said as he looked at the next pair of stones. There's not enough room for all 3 of us to do at the same time, Riyan said. In fact, the stone barely had enough room for 2 of them to stand on it at the same time. Bart nodded. Riyan, you come and help me then. Riyan untied the rope from around his middle and gave it to Chad. Hold on to this. Be careful, Chad said as he took the rope. Bart gave him a hand as he passed from the mouth of the passage to the stone. Once there, he took Bart's arm and provided the counterweight while he leaned out to check the stones. Again, it was the left-hand stone that sank into the acid. Looks like the path is on the right, Bart said. Just take your time and don't fall in. Then he had Chad hand Riyan the lantern, who in turn passed it to him. With the lantern now in hand, Bart stepped from one stone to the next until he crossed the room and reached the passage leading away on the other side. Now, I've thought about, well, why would it all just be on the right side? Shouldn't it be alternating to throw thieves off? Like Bart, he's assuming, shouldn't the third one be on the left side? But I got to thinking about it, and the whole point of this is to allow the Lord to escape after probably a very stressful battle, and he might not remember the intricacies of 2 1 1 2 1 1 2, right left left right left right left. So it'd be simpler just to make it to escape just the right side. That way the Lord knows right side. That's all he's got to think about in his most stressful time when everything around him is going kaput. Once there, he noticed a lever mounted on the wall several feet within the passage. He figured it would reset the stones to beneath the surface of the acid pool. Once Riyan and Chad joined him, he showed them the lever and told him what he thought it would do. Are you going to pull it? Riyan asked. Shaking his head, Bart said, No, we may need to return this way for some unforeseen reason. I think it would be best to leave the stepping stones where they are. Very well, agreed Riyan. Now, in my mind, since that's an escape route, the Lord and his buddy, one of his lieutenants, I'm assuming, activate the statues, bring the stones up. They run through, and then they pull the lever. Now, I would think that when that lever was pulled, it would drop the stones back in, and it would deactivate the other trap. That way, there's almost no way for anybody to follow him. That's how I think it would work out. I never said it, so if in some future date I come back to this, then maybe I'll manipulate it one way or the other as the story needs. But in my mind right now, that's what I'm thinking. Of course, maybe I want that, and it holds the stones in place and doesn't allow them to move ever, be reset until that's pulled back up. But I'm thinking it's to bring it down because it's an escape route. So it would make sense that the Lord would want the stones to be down permanently. And then, yeah. Before setting off down the passage, they tied themselves in tandem once again, just in case of another pitfall trap. Bart took the lead with the lantern in hand. The passage soon turned to the right. From there, it continued straight ahead for 50 feet or so before turning to the left. Bart took it slow and careful as he studied the floor of the passage as they went. After the last turn to the left, the passage continued for some time before coming to the end. At the end of the passage was a single large door, much larger than any they had thus far encountered. Emblazoned upon the door was a coat of arms that had been so prevalent in the ruins of Algoth. A sword pointed downward, with a dragon gripping the hilt in one claw, while its body twined around the blade. One of the problems I have with writing is its, ITS. half the time you don't need the apostrophe, half the time you need the apostrophe. And half the time when I don't need the apostrophe, I unconsciously put the apostrophe. And that was the case here. This has to be it, said Riyan, when the light illuminated the coat of arms. Most likely, agreed Bart. He moved forward to the door and after a quick check for traps, tried to open it. To his amazement, it actually swung open. He had expected it to be locked. This was far too easy. When the door swung open enough for the lantern's light to shine within the room on the other side, they gasped by what they saw. The Lord's treasure room! Riyan practically shouted. For when the door opened, the light revealed that the room contained 6 chests. 2 sat against the wall across from them, and 2 each against the walls to the right and left. Upon a stand in the middle of the floor sat an ornamental wooden boat that looked to have survived the passage of time well. The coat of arms that had been on the door was engraved into the side of the boat, and the prow boasted a carving of a dragon's head. The boat was large enough to sit 8 men comfortably and looked to be made most sturdily. Bart had to physically stop Riyan from running into the room in his excitement. Wait a minute, he shouted as he grabbed him by the arm. Yanking him out of the room and back into the passage, he said, You better calm down right now. Riyan glared at him for the way he had been treated. If you go running around in there, Bart began to explain to him, you may wind up getting yourself killed. He gazed into Ryan's eyes. Let me search first. Riyan gave him a kind of embarrassed smile. Sorry, he apologized. I forgot myself there for a moment. You two stay here, he told them. Then he turned back to the doorway and entered the room. First thing he did was to make a quick circuit around the room to get a good feel for the layout. He also discovered that farther down the wall from where the door stood was a very large depiction of the coat of arms engraved into the wall itself. It went from floor to ceiling and was encrusted with many gems. The lantern's light was refracted in a myriad of colors. Once he made a complete circuit of the room, he turned to Chad and Riyan. I think it's okay if you come in, he told them. Just don't touch anything. As they entered the room, he went to the first chest and began inspecting it for traps. This is amazing, observed Riyan. Upon entering the room, his eyes naturally went to the gem-encrusted coat of arms on the wall. He and Chad stood in front of it and marveled at the gems. They had to be worth a fortune. I couldn't take any of those, Chad said, indicating the gems. It wouldn't seem right. Riyan glanced at his friend and nodded. I get that feeling, too. Aren't they treasure hunters? Aren't they in search of money? Why wouldn't they take it? I guess they're just in awe of the place. And maybe something about it just doesn't feel right. I've questioned myself about the decision of them not taking those gems, prying them out. But I guess fundamentally they're good people, and they have respect for antiquity, I guess. Like maybe like Indiana Jones, I don't know. After a few moments admiring the coat of arms, they went over to the boat. What must have been some kind of the finest cloth ever made draped the seats inside. There was also a small chest sitting on the forward seat directly behind the dragon's head. Bart, Riyan hollered over to him, there's a small chest in here too. All right, I'll get to it in a minute, Ken replied. This one's open. You two can go through it now. He glanced over to where they stood by the boat as he held the lid of the chest open. I think you're going to like this. Really? Asked Chad excitedly. He and Riyan crossed the room quickly to open the chest. It was filled with dozens of gems of varying sizes. The majority were small ones, but at least 5 were pretty big. As they busily removed the gems and put them in their packs, Bart moved on to the next chest. It took Bart the better part of an hour to disarm and open all 6 chests. Only one of the traps went off while he was working on it. Fortunately, it was a variation of the prick of poison, and then it went off. And when it went off, his fingers were nowhere near the lock. The second chest held coins, hundreds of them. More than half were gold, the rest being silver. The third chest held jewelry, 14 rings, 7 necklaces, and a smattering of other small paraphernalia like brooches and such. Each was worked in precious metal, some even held gems of varying sizes. The fourth chest held a well-crafted longsword that had resisted the ravages of time. The scabbard was plain and nondescript, as was the hilt. Engraved in the nexus of the crossguard was a dragon sword coat of arms. Attached to the belt, along with the longsword scabbard, was another scabbard holding a knife. When Riyan pulled it forth, he could see the dragon sword coat of arms was engraved in the knife's crossguard as well. Riyan glanced at Chad questioningly. Do you mind? He asked. Chad looked longingly at the sword and knife, but nodded for Riyan to have it. Thank you, he said. Thank you, he said, as he unbelted the scabbard he currently wore. I have it. He unbelted the scabbard he was currently wore. And replaced it with the new one. I'm sure by this time my longtime readers, I mean, stuff like that probably just happens. And yeah, it bothers me they're in there. And I've gone over these time and time and time again. I'm sure a lot of people think he just wrote the thing and published it. No, I've actually gone through these multiple times, and yet they remain. And I came to the conclusion when I wrote The Unsuspecting Mage that I have no money for an editor. I'm not professional at this. I have no one in my circle who knows anything about this. I want to write this story. I want to get it out there. But if I wait until it's perfect, it'll never get out there. And so I've taken a big hit about the editing. You go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble, that's like the main critique I have. I'm sure I would have been way popular if I would have gone through writing courses, taken that time. But in my at this time, I had no money. I was a single dad with 3 kids. I had no time for school. I had no money for school, or at least I felt that way. I was working full time as a driving instructor, three small children, and basically I would drop them off, or the youngest, the short bus would come and pick her up for a half day kindergarten. As soon as she got on the bus, I would go up back upstairs on my computer, and I would write for 4 hours. She'd come home, and then I'd stop. Yeah. So I do the best I can. Okay. Next sword we find, I get, Chad stated. You got it, agreed Riyan. And if we don't come across another one, you get to have first pick of something else. The 5th chest held a piece of cloth. It was 1.5 feet long with runes inscribed along its length. From the uniform bulge running from one end to the other, it was easy to see that it held something. Chad reached in and picked it up. The cloth was actually a long, thin carrying pouch. Inside was something long and firm. One end of the cloth pouch opened up, and he pulled forth a long stick. It looked rather plain, with no markings or inscriptions on it. He held it up to Riyan and asked, "Could it be a wand?" "Perhaps. Better leave it alone for now." Chad nodded and slipped the wand back in the cloth pouch before placing it in his pack. The sight of the wand made him think of Kevik and what may have happened to him. He hoped he was okay and that they could get to him soon. So here's the thing. As I was reading this last night, because I read these the night before to smooth them out even more, and I'm still finding mistakes this morning. Anyway, so last night I'm reading through this, I'm thinking, okay, your buddy's at the bottom of the pit. He could be dead, could be dying, and you guys are just busy opening these chests, taking the time. Bart spent an hour opening all these chests. Why? Why shouldn't they get to Kevik first? But I did what I did. It made sense when I wrote it, and it's too late now. Okay. Unable to do anything about it now, he returned to the matter at hand. Leaving behind the 5th chest, he and Chad moved to the 6th, where Bart was just finishing with picking the lock. Well, there has to be a way out of this room. I didn't actually say that there was any other way out of this room. There was just 6 chests and the coat of arms, the June Crescent coat of arms. You know, there was the demon statue room. It went straight to the acid room, which went straight to this room. So once they've entered this area, there's been no other way out. So there's got to be another way out to continue from there, you would think, right? I mean, there were other passages that they hadn't gone through way back up, you know, back before the demon statue room. I mean, I suppose they could go back up there if they had to. But if this is the escape route, there has to be a way out, right? Okay. Inside the chest were. Okay. They waited patiently while he worked and then announced that he had it. Oh, hang on a second. Unable to do anything about it now, he returned to the matter at hand. Leaving behind the fifth chest, he and Chad moved to the sixth, where Bart was just finishing with picking the lock. Done? Asked Riyan as he and Chad came to a stop several feet away. Just about, replied Bart. Give me another minute. This one's kind of tricky. They waited patiently while he worked, and then he announced that he had it. They hurried over just as he was pulling up the lid, and all three looked in to see what the final chest held. Riyan was half hoping the rest of the key to the king's hoard would be inside, but he was disappointed. Inside the chest were two items. One was an intricately carved small box. The other was a folded cloak. Riyan picked up the box and opened it. Resting within on a soft cushion were two rings. Unadorned and plain, they didn't seem all that important. Riyan showed them to Chad. Magic, do you think? Perhaps, nodded Chad. Better keep them in the box until we know more about them. Riyan agreed. He remembered the tale that a bard had told one night when he stayed at the Sterling Sheep. It was about a group of adventurers that had uncovered some lost temple or other. During their exploration, they had come across a ring. Thinking it magical and valuable, one of their members had put it on. Turned out to be cursed, trap laid by the former occupants of the temple against thieves. The man had died a few days later. Closing the box, Riyan put it in his pack. Then he glanced over to Bart, who held the cloak. This is fine material, Bart said. I think I'll keep it if you two don't mind. They both shook their heads. If anyone deserved to have what they wanted, it was Bart. After all, he was the one putting his life on the line with every chest and trap. Bart grinned and said thanks. He folded it into a smaller square, then placed it within his pack. After that, he went over to the boat and soon had opened the small box Riyan had found. Within was a gray powder. He quickly shut the box again and locked it. He didn't want something like what happened to Chad happening to him. If you remember, Chad had there was that tube, and he opened it, and the crystals went into his palm, and then boom, his whole arm went numb. Bart can't afford to have his arm numb when he's got to work locks. After putting the box with the powder in his pack, he looked around. What? Asked Riyan. If this was a place where the Lord ran when his forces were overrun, he began to explain, then it would stand to reason that there has to be a way to continue from here. You think so? Asked Chad. Bart turned to him and nodded. Most definitely. He indicated the open chest around them. I hardly think this is the Lord's true treasure room. I would imagine it's here to satisfy thieves who made it this far so they wouldn't continue to search. I don't know, argued Riyan. This all seems rather valuable. Bart thought about that for a moment and shook his head. No. Maybe if I wasn't aware the Lord had come this way as an escape route, I would feel different. So what do we do now? Asked Chad. He glanced around the room with a sigh before replying. We painstakingly search this room until we find the way the Lord went. And that ends chapter 25, or chapter 24. So tomorrow will be chapter 25. So we got Kevik unconscious in a pit somewhere. The boys spending time opening chests and getting treasure while Kevik possibly lies down in the pit bleeding his last. And now they got to find the way out. Well, from my adventuring days when other people would run dungeons, I would search the mural. That just seems like the logical place to go from here would be the mural, or the Jim and Cressy coat of arms, right? Everything else all the other walls are just plain, so that's where I would search. Anyway, that ends chapter 24. Things are getting interesting. I like this one because I get to explore traps some more, try to be clever, try to make it logical in the world, of course, and yeah. So if you like this, click like. Can always use more likes. I got a new subscriber this morning when I woke up, so I'm at 144. Just need 856 more. So at about 3 a week. Actually, I think I'm averaging, other than the initial boost that I'm sure came from all my fans, current readers that is, that I think I've got like maybe 2 or 3 a week. So it'll be a long time. It could be a very long time before I get the 1,000 needed to actually start earning money from this channel. Hope you all have a good day. It's going to be nice here until the evening. The more storms roll in. And we'll talk to you tomorrow.